How often do we let the opinions of others dictate our peace of mind? In today's world, where every word and action can be scrutinized both online and in real life, it's almost impossible to avoid criticism or judgment. Yet, as Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. What if we could face criticism not with anger or anxiety, but with a sense of calm and clarity? In this video, we're exploring how the timeless wisdom of Stoicism can help us navigate the inevitable trials of judgment and critique, transforming these challenges into opportunities for growth. So, how do you respond when criticism comes your way? Let's dive into the Stoic way of reclaiming your power over your mind. Criticism is an inevitable part of life. No matter who you are or what you do, there will always be someone with an opinion, a judgment, or a critique to offer. It can come from a coworker, a friend, a stranger online, or even from within, those nagging doubts we impose on ourselves. But here's the thing, we can't stop others from judging us or giving unsolicited feedback. It's human nature, and as the Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, we cannot control the actions or opinions of others, only our reactions to them. In his words, it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. So, instead of spending energy trying to avoid criticism, what if we focused on how we respond to it? Think about it. Have you ever received negative feedback at work? Maybe your boss pointed out a mistake during a meeting, or a colleague made a comment that felt unnecessarily harsh. Or perhaps it's happened online where criticism can be particularly brutal. A social media post or a creative project you poured your heart into gets criticized, and suddenly, those words linger in your mind, replaying over and over. How did you react in those moments? Were you defensive, angry, or hurt? Did you let it ruin your day, or maybe even your week? Here's what the Stoics teach us: criticism is not the problem. The problem lies in how we perceive it. When we reject the reality that judgment is unavoidable, we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves. The first step in adopting a Stoic mindset is to accept this truth. People will always have opinions shaped by their own experiences, beliefs, and biases. And often, their judgment has more to do with them than it does with you. Once you internalize this, you start to realize that their opinions don't define your worth. A modern example can help put this into perspective. Picture a musician releasing a new album. Some fans might love it, calling it a masterpiece, while others criticize it for not meeting their expectations. The music itself hasn't changed. It's the same collection of songs, but the reactions vary wildly. If the musician tied their sense of value to people's feedback, positive or negative, they'd constantly be on an emotional roller coaster. Instead, the Stoic approach would be to focus on what's in their control: their effort, their creativity, and their intention behind the work. The opinions, those are beyond their influence, so why let them disrupt their peace? Now, let's turn it back to you. How do you handle criticism when it comes your way? Do you brush it off, or does it sit with you, pulling you into a cycle of overthinking and self-doubt? Take a moment to reflect. What would it feel like to respond with calm acceptance instead of emotional turbulence? By shifting your mindset, you can turn criticism into an opportunity to practice resilience, not by suppressing your emotions, but by choosing not to let them control you. Criticism, whether constructive or not, is simply feedback about the world, not a verdict on you as a person. Accepting its inevitability doesn't mean you agree with it or ignore the lessons it might offer. It means you recognize that the power lies in how you choose to interpret and respond to it, and that's where the Stoic strength of character begins. As Epictetus wisely observed, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This simple yet profound idea forms the cornerstone of the Stoic mindset, the concept of the dichotomy of control. According to this principle, there are two categories of things in life: those we can control and those we cannot. When it comes to criticism and judgment, this distinction is crucial. You can't control what others think about you, what they say, or how they choose to perceive your actions. But what you can control is how you respond to those judgments, and ultimately how much power you allow them to hold over you. Let's break this down. Imagine a situation many of us can relate to. Perhaps a family member or close friend has criticized a decision you've made, whether it's about your career, your lifestyle, or even something as personal as the way you've chosen to raise your children. Their words might sting. You might feel the urge to defend yourself, to explain why your choice is valid, or even to argue your side until they finally see things your way. But here's the truth: no amount of effort on your part can truly control their opinion. Their judgment is shaped by their own beliefs, experiences, and values, factors entirely outside your influence. So trying to change their perspective or seeking their approval, it's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter your grip, the more it slips away. Now, here's where Stoicism offers a liberating alternative. Instead of wasting emotional energy on what you can't control, other people's words or opinions, you refocus that energy on what's firmly within your power, your own thoughts, attitudes, and actions. For example, when faced with that family member's criticism, you could choose to remain calm, to acknowledge their perspective without letting it shake your confidence in your decision. You might calmly say, "I appreciate your concern, but this is the choice I feel is right for me." This response doesn't mean you're dismissing their opinion or refusing to listen. It simply means you're not letting their judgment dictate your peace of mind. Redirecting your energy in this way fosters a profound sense of inner peace. Think about it. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you free yourself from a constant cycle of frustration and disappointment. You begin to realize that external events, including judgment, only have as much power over you as you're willing to give them. By focusing on your internal response, you reclaim that power. A practical way to apply this principle in your daily life is to pause and ask yourself a simple question whenever you're faced with criticism. Is this within my control? If it's not, let it go. This doesn't mean ignoring feedback altogether. Some criticism can be valuable and constructive, but even then, your focus should remain on how you choose to use it, not on whether it was delivered kindly or whether others approve of your response. So take a moment to reflect. How often do you exhaust yourself trying to manage the opinions of others? What would change if instead you focused entirely on your own actions, your own growth, and your own sense of purpose? As the Stoics remind us, the key to lasting peace lies not in changing the world around you, but in mastering the world within you. By shifting your focus to what you can control, you not only navigate criticism with greater ease, but you also strengthen your ability to live a life that aligns with your values, no matter what others might say. What if criticism only hurts because of the way we interpret it? This idea might feel counterintuitive at first. After all, when someone says something hurtful, it's natural to think their words are the cause of our pain. But here's where Stoicism offers a powerful shift in perspective. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoic philosophers, famously wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." In other words, it's not the criticism itself that causes us anguish, it's the meaning we attach to it. Think about it this way. Imagine you're walking down the street and a stranger shouts something rude at you. Their words objectively are just sound vibrations in the air. They don't have any inherent power to hurt you. Yet, if you interpret those words as a personal attack, you might feel embarrassed, angry, or even question yourself. On the other hand, if you shrug it off and think, well, they must be having a bad day, their words lose all power over you. This is the essence of the Stoic view on perception. Our minds act as a kind of filter, shaping how we experience the world. Criticism isn't inherently painful, it's neutral. What makes it sting is the narrative we create around it. If we interpret it as a reflection of our worth, we suffer. But if we view it with detachment and clarity, we can strip it of its emotional weight. Let's consider an example. Picture an artist who just unveiled a new painting. The first viewer says, "This is breathtaking, it's your best work yet." The artist feels proud and validated. But then someone else walks by and says, "This looks amateurish, I don't like it at all." If the artist attaches their self-worth to this second comment, they might feel defeated and question their abilities. But notice what's happening here. The painting hasn't changed. What's changed is the artist's perception of the feedback they're receiving. By cultivating awareness of how we interpret criticism, we gain the power to choose our response. This doesn't mean ignoring all feedback or pretending negative comments don't exist. Instead, it's about stepping back and asking, what am I making this mean? If we see criticism as an opportunity to learn or as simply one person's perspective, it no longer feels like a personal attack. It becomes something we can evaluate objectively without letting it shake our inner peace. Here's a practical way to apply this. The next time someone criticizes you, pause and ask yourself, is their critique a reflection of me, or is it just their opinion? Often you'll find it's the latter. The way someone interprets your actions or work is usually tied to their own experiences, preferences, or even insecurities. It's not an absolute truth about you. Recognizing this allows you to shift your perspective and stay grounded. Another key tool is to question the validity of the narrative you're creating. If someone tells you, "You're not very good at this," does that make it true, or is it simply their subjective opinion? The Stoics remind us that most of the pain we feel comes from within, from exaggerated stories we tell ourselves like, "I'm a failure" or "I'll never be good enough." By challenging these assumptions, you can dismantle their emotional hold on you. Ultimately, perception is the lens through which we experience criticism. Change the lens and you change the experience. By mastering this practice, you'll find yourself less disturbed by external judgments and more focused on what truly matters: your values, your growth, and your own sense of purpose. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the power to revoke distress is always within your grasp. It's simply a matter of choosing how you see the world. So, how will you choose to perceive criticism the next time it comes your way? Let's talk about the role of ego when it comes to criticism. For most of us, our initial reaction to judgment or feedback is often rooted in one thing: our ego. It's that inner voice that whispers, "How dare they say that about me?" Or, "I can't believe they don't see how much effort I put into this." The ego craves validation and resists anything that threatens its sense of self-worth. But the Stoics teach us that if we allow our ego to take control, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Why? Because ego blinds us to the truth, and it prevents us from seeing criticism for what it really is: an opportunity to learn and grow. Seneca, one of the most well-known Stoic philosophers, offers wisdom on how to overcome this tendency. He encourages us to replace defensiveness with humility and self-examination. As he wrote, "You must lay aside the load of your anxieties. The spirit cannot truly take in the truth unless it is free from preoccupation and distraction." In simpler terms, if you let your ego dominate, you can't fully see the lessons that feedback might offer because you're too busy protecting your pride. But by approaching criticism with humility, you free yourself to evaluate it rationally and honestly. let's take a common example, a performance review at work. Imagine your manager sits you down and points out areas where you could improve. They might say, "Your presentation skills need work," or "I've noticed you're not as organized as you could be." If your ego kicks in, you might feel defensive and think, "But I worked so hard on that project," or worse, you might dismiss their words altogether, convincing yourself they're being unfair. This reaction is natural, but it's also limiting. When you let your ego take over, you miss the chance to grow from their feedback. Now, picture handling the same situation the Stoic way. Instead of letting your ego react, you pause and focus on what's within your control, your attitude and your willingness to learn. Instead of taking the feedback as a personal attack, you view it as valuable information. You ask yourself, is there truth in what they're saying? And if there is, how can I use this to improve? Maybe your manager is right. You could fine-tune your presentation skills or develop better organizational habits. By separating your ego from the critique, you shift your focus from protecting your pride to becoming better at what you do. This shift in perspective takes practice, but it's incredibly freeing. Criticism stops feeling like an attack and starts feeling like a gift, even if it's not presented kindly. Remember, the Stoics believed that there's something to learn from everyone. Seneca even suggested seeking out advice from others regularly, not to feed your ego but to refine your character. He understood that true strength comes from humility, the ability to reflect on yourself honestly without clinging to an inflated sense of self-importance. Now, here's the key takeaway. Not all feedback is valid or useful, but separating it from your ego allows you to assess it calmly and rationally. If the feedback is fair, you can use it to grow. If it's unfounded, you can let it go without resentment. Either way, humility shields you from turning criticism into unnecessary pain. So the next time someone offers feedback, whether it's during a work review, a conversation with a friend, or even from a stranger, try this. Pause, silence your ego, and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? By practicing humility and self-examination, you not only grow stronger but also gain control over how feedback affects you, turning judgment into one of your greatest teachers. Imagine this, you're at work, and during a team meeting, a colleague publicly criticizes your approach to a recent project. Their tone is sharp and their words feel dismissive. Before you can even think, your emotions flare up. You interrupt them mid-sentence, defending your position with equal sharpness, and the tension in the room escalates. What started as a critique of your work has now become a personal conflict, leaving you frustrated, your colleague offended, and the team dynamic strained. Sound familiar? Now, let's rewind and replay that scenario, this time with a Stoic approach. Instead of reacting impulsively, you take a deep breath. You remind yourself that their criticism, no matter how it's delivered, reflects their perspective. It's not a definitive judgment of your worth. You listen calmly and let them finish speaking. Then, instead of defending yourself or retaliating, you respond with patience and composure. You might say something like, "I appreciate your feedback and I'll reflect on it further." Could you share more specifics about what you think could be improved? This simple shift in response not only de-escalates the situation, but also demonstrates the virtues Stoicism champions: patience, kindness, and integrity. Stoicism teaches us that how we respond to others, especially in moments of criticism, says more about our character than the criticism itself. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and one of the great Stoic philosophers, emphasized this in his Meditations. He said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." In other words, it's not enough to simply aspire to virtuous behavior, we must live it. When faced with judgment, the Stoic path calls us to respond in alignment with values like justice, self-control, and kindness, regardless of how others behave. But why respond with virtue when it's so much easier to react defensively or match someone else's hostility? The practical benefits are profound. First, staying composed allows us to maintain clarity of thought. When we react out of anger or ego, we often say or do things we regret later, escalating conflicts unnecessarily. By staying calm, we preserve our ability to think rationally and respond intentionally rather than impulsively. This not only keeps the situation under control but also earns the respect of others. People notice when someone handles criticism with grace. It's a rare quality in a world where overreaction is often the norm. Second, responding with patience and kindness diffuses negativity. When someone criticizes us harshly, it's often a reflection of their own frustrations or insecurities. Reacting with hostility only feeds the cycle of negativity, deepening the divide. But by taking the high road, we set a different tone. A calm, measured response can disarm the other person, showing them that conflict isn't necessary and creating space for constructive dialogue instead. For example, if someone criticizes you in a meeting, rather than snapping back, you could say, "Thank you for sharing your perspective. I'll think about it and see how I can apply that moving forward." Even if their critique was harsh or unfair, your response demonstrates self-control and professionalism, turning the moment into an opportunity to showcase your integrity. Finally, embracing virtuous responses fosters inner peace. When we let criticism provoke anger or resentment, we allow others to control our emotions. But when we respond with virtue guided by patience, kindness, and justice, we retain that control. We align our actions with who we want to be, which is far more important than winning a disagreement or proving someone wrong. So the next time you're faced with criticism, remember that the way you respond is entirely within your control. Choose patience over impulsivity, kindness over hostility, and integrity over defensiveness. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. By responding with virtue, you rise above the negativity, protect your peace, and prove that true strength lies in self-mastery. What kind of example do you want to set in moments of judgment? Stoicism challenges us to meet those moments not with reactivity, but with quiet, steady virtue. Have you ever stopped to consider that criticism often says more about the person giving it than it does about you? It's a fascinating idea, isn't it? Yet, it's one that the Stoics understood deeply. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, taught that people act and speak based on their own values, experiences, and limitations. He explained, people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. In the same way, criticism doesn't come out of nowhere, it's shaped by the perspective of the critic. Understanding this can be a powerful tool for navigating judgment with clarity and calm. Let's break this down. Imagine someone criticizes your work saying, "You always take shortcuts. You never do things the right way." It's easy to feel attacked and immediately get defensive. But what if, instead of reacting, you paused and tried to see things through their eyes? Maybe they have a perfectionist mindset and believe there's only one right way to do something. Or perhaps their criticism stems from their own insecurities. Maybe they fear being judged themselves, and projecting their frustrations onto you is their way of coping. When you take a step back and analyze where their criticism is coming from, you begin to see that their words aren't necessarily a reflection of you or your abilities. They're a reflection of how they view the world. This practice of examining the source of criticism is incredibly freeing. By understanding that people's judgments are rooted in their individual experiences and beliefs, you can start to depersonalize their words. Instead of thinking, "They must be right, I must have done something wrong," you realize, their criticism tells me more about them than about me. This shift in perspective not only helps you avoid overreacting, but it also allows you to approach the situation with curiosity instead of defensiveness. You might even find an opportunity to learn something valuable in the process. Take, for example, the dynamic between a coach and an athlete. A coach might harshly critique an athlete's performance, saying, "You're not putting in enough effort." While this could feel discouraging, stepping back to analyze the coach's perspective changes the conversation. Perhaps the coach values discipline above all else and sees effort as the ultimate indicator of success. The criticism, while blunt, isn't about the athlete's worth. It's about the coach's personal belief system. Recognizing this doesn't mean dismissing the feedback entirely, but it does mean you don't internalize it as an absolute judgment of who you are. So, how can you apply this in your own life? The next time you're criticized, pause and ask yourself, what might this person's criticism reveal about their values or concerns? Are they projecting their own fears or frustrations? Are they holding me to a standard they hold dear, even if I don't share it? This exercise isn't about excusing rude or unkind behavior. It's about gaining clarity. Once you understand where their judgment is coming from, you can decide how much weight, if any, to give it. Think about a recent instance when you were criticized. Maybe it was a comment from a friend, a coworker, or even a stranger online. Reflect on the person who gave the critique. What do you know about their values, their priorities, or their circumstances? Does their criticism stem from their own worldview rather than an objective assessment of you? By asking these questions, you might find that their feedback feels less personal and more like an insight into their perspective. Ultimately, the Stoics remind us that everyone sees the world through their own lens, shaped by their experiences and beliefs. When others criticize, it's not about uncovering some universal truth about you. It's about their interpretation of reality. By remembering this, you empower yourself to respond with composure instead of reacting impulsively. So the next time someone's words sting, take a moment to step into their shoes. You might just find that their criticism has little, if anything, to do with you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed." It is the person who continues in their self-deception and ignorance who is harmed. This quote captures the essence of Stoic emotional detachment, a practice that allows us to face opinions and judgments from others without letting them take root in our minds. It's not about becoming indifferent or uncaring. It's about staying grounded and refusing to let external negativity disrupt your inner peace. Let's get one thing clear. Emotional detachment doesn't mean ignoring criticism or pretending it doesn't affect you. It means cultivating the ability to separate your sense of self from external opinions. Someone might criticize your work, your choices, or even your personality. Their words might sting for a moment, but with practice, you can train yourself not to internalize that sting or let it define your sense of worth. Instead of carrying their judgment with you, replaying it in your mind, or allowing it to weigh you down, emotional detachment teaches you to observe it, acknowledge it, and let it go. A huge part of this practice is self-awareness. You have to recognize when emotions like anger, embarrassment, or self-doubt start to bubble up in response to criticism. Without this awareness, it's all too easy to spiral into overthinking. For example, let's say you post something on social media, maybe a photo or a personal thought, and someone leaves a negative comment saying, "This is dumb," or "No one cares." In that moment, you might feel hurt, or worse, you might begin to question yourself. Was what I posted really that bad? Did I make a mistake by sharing this? But here's the thing, their comment is not about you. It's a reflection of their perspective, their mood, or perhaps even their own insecurities. By cultivating emotional detachment, you can acknowledge that their words exist without attaching unnecessary meaning to them. Instead of thinking, "They're right, and this says something about me," you shift your perspective to, "This says something about them, and I don't need to carry it with me." You allow the comment to pass through your awareness like a leaf floating down a stream, rather than clinging to it and letting it disrupt your peace. Mindfulness plays a crucial role here. When you notice yourself reacting emotionally to criticism, pause and take a step back. Ask yourself, why am I giving this opinion so much power? Is this comment something I can learn from, or is it just noise? Not every piece of feedback deserves your attention, and by pausing, you can evaluate whether it's constructive or simply a reflection of someone else's negativity. This practice builds resilience because you're no longer handing over control of your emotions to others. Here's a simple exercise to strengthen your emotional detachment. The next time someone criticizes you, pause and imagine their words as physical objects being handed to you. You have a choice. You can accept these objects and carry them with you, or you can decline to take them, letting them fall harmlessly to the ground. Visualizing this choice reminds you that their words only have power if you decide to hold on to them. Reflect for a moment. How much energy have you spent overthinking someone's judgment or replaying a hurtful comment in your mind? What if instead you simply let it go? Without the weight of external opinions dragging you down, you'd be freer to focus on what truly matters: your own growth, character, and values. Practicing emotional detachment doesn't happen overnight, but with time, it can transform how you respond to criticism. By staying mindful and refusing to internalize the negativity around you, you'll become more resilient, more composed, and ultimately more in control of your peace of mind. So the next time someone's judgment threatens to lodge in your mind, ask yourself, is this worth holding onto, or can I let it go? How can anyone shake your confidence if you truly know yourself? It's a powerful question, isn't it? At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies the idea that self-knowledge, the deep understanding of your own principles and values, is your strongest shield against the opinions and judgments of others. When you are clear about who you are and what you stand for, external criticism loses its grip on you. It no longer has the power to knock you off course because your foundation comes from within, not from the approval or disapproval of others. Seneca, the great Roman Stoic, spoke extensively on this idea. He believed that self-confidence, the kind that comes not from arrogance but from being deeply aligned with your values, was the key to resilience. He wrote, "You can live happy anywhere if you live wisely, tolerantly, and unambitiously. As long as you know who you are and what matters to you, the chaos of the world and the opinions of others won't disturb your peace." In essence, if your confidence is rooted in your own principles, criticism feels less like an attack and more like background noise. So how do you build this kind of internal alignment? It starts with getting clear on your core values. What do you stand for? What are the principles that guide your decisions and actions? For some, it might be honesty, kindness, or hard work. For others, it might be courage, loyalty, or creativity. By defining these for yourself, you give your life direction and meaning that doesn't rely on external validation. You create an internal compass that keeps you steady even when others try to pull you off track. Let's look at a practical example. Imagine you're in a disagreement with a coworker. Perhaps they're pushing you to cut corners on a project to save time, but one of your core values is integrity, doing what's right, even when it's difficult. If you weren't clear on your values, you might feel overwhelmed by their pressure or worry about how standing up to them might make you appear. But if integrity is a principle you've committed to, your decision becomes much simpler. You can calmly explain your position, not because you want their approval, but because you're staying true to what matters to you. Whether they agree with you or not becomes secondary. Your self-respect remains intact because you acted in alignment with your values. This clarity doesn't just help you in the heat of the moment, it also gives you something to reflect on afterward. Did your actions align with the person you want to be? If the answer is yes, then the criticism or judgment you face becomes far less important. You've already won by staying true to yourself. Now think about your own life. How often do you let others' opinions sway you, even when they conflict with what you know in your heart to be right? How different would it feel to remain grounded, fully confident in the values that guide you? The Stoics urge us to focus on this inner clarity because it's something no one can take away from us. Unlike wealth, status, or even our reputation, things that can be influenced by others, our values are entirely within our control. To start building this resilience, take a moment to reflect on your own principles. Write them down. Ask yourself, what do I believe in so deeply that no criticism could shake it? The more you own these values, the less power others' opinions will have over you. And when difficult situations arise, return to this question: am I acting in alignment with my core beliefs? If the answer is yes, then you have nothing to fear from judgment. As Seneca reminds us, true happiness and peace begin within. So, what values will you choose to anchor yourself to? Criticism, while often uncomfortable, is one of the most powerful tools for self-improvement if we learn how to use it wisely. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very obstacles we face, including criticism, can serve as stepping stones for growth if we choose to embrace them with the right mindset. Instead of viewing feedback as a threat to your ego or a challenge to your worth, you can reframe it as an opportunity to get better, to sharpen your character, and to move closer to your potential. Let's consider two approaches to criticism. First, there's the all-too-common reaction of defensiveness. Imagine you're in a meeting at work and a colleague critiques your proposal, saying, "I don't think this idea is as strong as it could be." If your first instinct is to defend yourself, to explain why your idea is great or dismiss their feedback outright, you might feel an initial sense of relief, like you've protected yourself from feeling inadequate. But in doing so, you've missed a chance to learn. You've effectively shut the door to self-improvement because you prioritized defending your pride over considering whether there's merit in the critique. Now contrast that with what the Stoics would advise, approaching criticism with curiosity. Instead of reacting emotionally to the comment, you pause and ask yourself, is there any truth in what they said? Could this feedback help me improve? You can even engage with the person offering the critique by asking them to elaborate. "Thank you for sharing that," you might say. "Can you tell me more about what you think could make this idea stronger?" By doing this, you're not only showing maturity and openness, but you're also gaining insights that might make your work or yourself better. A relatable example of this mindset comes from the world of sports. Think of an athlete working with a coach. The coach's role is to identify weaknesses and areas for improvement, often pointing out mistakes the athlete might not even realize they're making. If the athlete takes every critique personally and gets defensive, they block their own progress. But if they approach the feedback with humility and curiosity, they can use it to refine their skills. A swimmer who takes their coach's advice to improve their stroke technique, for instance, may find that those small adjustments ultimately shave precious seconds off their race time. That improvement wouldn't have been possible without viewing the criticism not as an attack but as a gift. This principle doesn't apply only to structured feedback like from a coach or a boss. Even unsolicited or poorly delivered criticism can hold valuable insights if we can look past the delivery. Perhaps someone points out a flaw in your behavior in an unkind way. Instead of reacting to the tone of their comment, ask yourself, is there anything here I can learn from? Maybe their delivery was harsh, but their observation holds a kernel of truth, one that, if you're willing to face it, can help you grow as a person. Now let's turn this reflection toward you. Think about a time when someone criticized you and your immediate reaction was discomfort or defensiveness. What might have changed if, instead of pushing back, you stepped into a stoic mindset and viewed that moment as an opportunity to learn? How could you have used their feedback, whether it was perfectly delivered or not, as a tool to improve yourself? By embracing criticism as a tool for growth, you not only develop greater resilience but also unlock a pathway to becoming your best self. The Stoics remind us that adversity, including judgment and feedback, is not a wall to keep us stuck but a path forward. Are you willing to turn criticism into your ally? With the right mindset, every piece of feedback, whether constructive or harsh, becomes another chance to grow. What stands in the way truly can become the way. Picture this: you're in the middle of a conversation and suddenly someone lashes out at you. Maybe they criticize your work, question your intentions, or even make a personal remark. Their words are sharp, their tone cutting, and you feel the sting almost immediately. Your first instinct might be to respond, to defend yourself, to correct them, or maybe to lash back. But what if, instead of reacting, you simply said nothing? What if you chose silence? The Stoics often spoke of silence as one of the most powerful tools at our disposal. Epictetus, in particular, taught that not all provocations deserve a response. He reminded us that we are in control of how we choose to engage with others, and sometimes the wisest thing we can do is to ignore unworthy provocations altogether. He said, if your body were turned over to just anyone, you would doubtless take exception. Why aren't you ashamed that you have made your mind vulnerable to anyone who happens to criticize you? What he meant is that when we react impulsively to judgment or criticism, we hand over control of our peace of mind to someone else. Silence, in contrast, allows us to keep that control firmly in our hands. Let's revisit that hypothetical scenario. The person who lashed out is likely expecting a reaction. They want you to defend yourself or escalate the situation. But when you choose silence instead, you disrupt the pattern. By not engaging, you send a subtle but powerful message. Their words don't control you. In that moment, your silence becomes a demonstration of self-control and inner strength. It's not about ignoring the problem or suppressing your thoughts. It's about recognizing that not every comment or judgment deserves a response. Silence can be your way of saying, I won't waste my energy on this. Now think about your own life. Have you ever been in a situation where saying nothing would have been the better response? Maybe it was during an argument where emotions were running high and a single word could have escalated things further. Or perhaps someone criticized you unfairly, and by engaging, you only fueled their negativity. In those moments, silence often holds more power than any words you could muster. It creates space for you to reflect, to breathe, and to respond thoughtfully if a response is even necessary. Silence doesn't just diffuse tension, it also preserves your dignity. By refusing to stoop to anger or retaliation, you show that you value your peace of mind more than the fleeting satisfaction of winning an argument. And here's the beauty of it: silence often speaks louder than words. It reflects a quiet confidence, a sense of self-assuredness that doesn't need constant validation. When someone lashes out and you remain calm, your composure says everything that needs to be said. For example, imagine a scenario where a colleague publicly criticizes your work in front of others. The instinct might be to leap to your own defense, to explain yourself, or even to criticize them in return. But instead, you stay silent, meeting their words with a calm demeanor. In that moment, you maintain your professionalism, while their outburst speaks volumes about their character. later, when the emotions have settled, you can choose whether it's worth addressing their critique more calmly and constructively. But in the moment, your silence shows control and maturity. The next time you're confronted with criticism or provocation, pause and consider whether silence might be your best response. Ask yourself, do these words truly merit a reaction, or can I rise above them by saying nothing at all? As the Stoics remind us, silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. It gives you the power to disengage from negativity, to preserve your peace, and to uphold your dignity. So, when faced with judgment, remember this: sometimes the strongest voice you have is the one that says nothing. As we come to the end of this journey through the Stoic way of handling criticism and judgment, let's take a moment to reflect on the timeless principles we've explored. First, we learned about controlling our perception, the idea that it's not criticism itself that causes us distress, but the meaning we attach to it. When we shift our perspective and see judgment as neutral, influenced by the worldview of others, it loses its power to harm us. This is the foundation of Stoic strength, reclaiming control over our reactions and refusing to let others' opinions dictate our peace of mind. We also discussed the importance of detachment, not from life but from the emotional weight of judgment. By separating our sense of self-worth from external opinions, we free ourselves from the need to constantly seek approval or avoid criticism. This detachment allows us to approach feedback objectively, using it as a tool for growth rather than a source of insecurity. The Stoics remind us that criticism, no matter how it's delivered, is only as meaningful as we choose to make it. Finally, we explored the value of responding with virtue. Whether through patience, humility, or silence, how we respond to others ultimately reflects our character. Instead of reacting impulsively, the Stoic approach challenges us to embody our highest values, even in the face of negativity. As Marcus Aurelius so wisely put it, the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. By choosing virtue over reactivity, we not only maintain our integrity, but also set an example of strength and self-control. The beauty of Stoicism lies in its practicality. These aren't abstract philosophical ideas meant to be admired from a distance. They're tools you can use every day. The next time you face criticism, pause and ask yourself, is this within my control? How can I perceive this situation differently? Am I acting in alignment with my values? And most importantly, remember that no one's opinion can truly define you. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, it never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. Let's reverse that. Let's focus on becoming the best versions of ourselves, regardless of what others think. Now, I'd like to leave you with this thought. How might your life change if you fully embraced these principles? What would it look like to face criticism not with fear or defensiveness, but with calm, clarity, and strength? Reflect on that as you go about your day and consider how you might apply these Stoic practices to your own experiences. If you found value in these ideas, let's continue this journey together. Share your insights in the comments. How do you currently handle criticism, and which Stoic principle resonated with you the most? And don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom from the Stoics as we explore how their ancient teachings can help us lead more resilient, meaningful lives. Thank you for watching, and remember, the path to inner peace begins with mastering your mind.